It was the kind of cold that didn't just sit on the skin, but burrowed deep into the marrow, a sharp and relentless freeze that defined the morning of December 19, 1944, in the Ardennes forest of Belgium, where Private First Class Vincent Romano sat perched 40 feet above the snow-covered earth in the crotch of a frozen oak tree, watching 23 German soldiers ghost through the fog below him. At 4:47 a.m., with his breath crystallizing instantly in the air, that hung at a brutal 8 degrees Fahrenheit, Romano had 6 rounds remaining in his rifle, and a terrifying resolve that would see him kill 87 enemy soldiers over a span of 72 hours without ever leaving his position, an act that would rewrite every established doctrine the United States Army had ever drafted regarding sniper employment, and nearly see him face a court-martial for his defiance. The metal of his M1903A4 Springfield pressed against his cheek, cold enough to burn through his wool face wrap, as he observed the Feldgrau uniforms moving like phantoms through the morning mist, the vanguard of SS reconnaissance units probing American lines during the chaotic opening days of the Battle of the Bulge. Romano tracked the lead soldier through his Weaver 330C scope at a distance of 800 yards, watching as the German paused to light a cigarette, cupping his hands around the match in a gesture of casual humanity that would be his last. For Romano's finger found the trigger, the rifle bucked against his shoulder, and the German collapsed sideways into the snow with his cigarette still burning beside his outstretched hand, leaving 22 soldiers remaining, and starting a grim count that would terrorize an entire SS regiment. He did not know it yet, but that single kill initiated a sequence of events that would violate every standing order about sniper withdrawal protocols, and prove that sometimes the deadliest weapon in war isn't the one firing the most rounds, but the one that refuses to move. To understand why Romano sat in that tree, one had to look back to the streets of Red Hook, Brooklyn, where he grew up just 3 blocks from the waterfront, the son of a dock worker and an office cleaner, who by age 12 was hunting pigeons off tenement roofs with a borrowed .22 rifle to sell to restaurants for 15 cents apiece, and who by 14 could hit a tin can at 200 yards with iron sights. While the neighborhood produced boxers and dock workers, Romano became a student of stillness, spending hours on rooftops learning the language of patience, studying wind patterns and how heat shimmer distorted distance, discovering that pigeons like the enemy he would later face had excellent vision and would scatter at fast movements, but remained oblivious to those who moved slowly enough. This skill, honed on the tar roofs of New York, was what he brought to the army when he enlisted 3 days after Pearl Harbor, at age 19, where his shooting scores were so immediately perfect that he was sent to sniper school at Camp Perry, Ohio, to learn a doctrine that emphasized shooting and relocating, never firing more than 3 shots from one position to avoid the triangulation of muzzle flash by enemy counter-snipers. Romano listened to the instructors and understood the logic of survival through mobility, yet he also understood that such doctrine was written for open battlefields and not for the desperate, dense defense against overwhelming force required in the forests of Europe. By December 1944, he had been in Europe for 7 months, surviving Normandy and the Hurtgen forest with 38 confirmed kills and a reputation for solid by-the-book work, watching other snipers like Miller and Sullivan die because they stayed in church towers or barns too long, reinforcing the lesson that mobility equaled survival. But then came the Ardennes offensive on December 16, when 28 German divisions smashed through American lines, scattering units and collapsing communication, leaving Romano's 12-man squad from the 99th Infantry Division retreated into the dense forest south of Rocherath, digging in on a hillside, overlooking a logging road that soon swarmed not with the Wehrmacht, but with the fanatical 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend. The American squad was isolated, with 3 days of ammunition and no radio, and while standard doctrine dictated they should withdraw, their sergeant Patrick O'Brien from South Boston realized that movement meant contact and death, deciding instead to stay hidden and let the Germans pass. Romano, however, saw opportunity in the logging road, recognizing it as a vital German supply route carrying ammunition and intelligence, and realized that disrupting it could slow the enemy advance, even if it meant violating everything he had been taught about sniper doctrine by staying in one position for days, inviting mortars and artillery. On the night of December 17th, after watching 47 German soldiers use the road, Romano approached O'Brien with a proposal to shut the road down, acknowledging that while doctrine said shoot and move, the situation required a static defense to force the Germans to find another route. Despite O'Brien's warnings that staying in one spot would lead to death by mortar fire or counter-snipers, and that it was a court-martial offence to disobey standing orders. Romano insisted, and O'Brien, recognizing the desperate necessity, allowed him to proceed while promising to deny the conversation ever happened. Romano spent 2 hours preparing his position in a massive oak tree, 60 yards behind the squad, finding a natural platform where branches intersected 40 feet up, tying himself to the trunk with parachute cord, and arranging pine boughs for camouflage while stacking 20 rounds of ammunition, water and rations within reach, understanding that if German mortars found him, the tree would become his coffin with no escape from the shrapnel. On December 18th, the killing began in earnest at 6:47 a.m., when 6 SS soldiers appeared, and Romano, with the mechanical precision of his pigeon-hunting days, dropped the lead soldier and systematically dismantled the group, killing 5 in 90 seconds while the survivors fired blindly at the hillside, unable to locate the source of the shots in the sound-dampening cold air. When 15 more Germans arrived later to inspect the bodies, making the amateur mistake of clustering together, Romano punished them with a series of shots that dropped 4 men and sent the rest fleeing, continuing his work throughout the day until he had fired 34 rounds for 29 confirmed kills, leaving the logging road empty and silent by sunset. O'Brien climbed up that night to bring supplies, calling Romano insane but acknowledging that the plan was working. The second day, December 19th, brought a deeper cold that numbed Romano's feet and hands, but also brought a more organized enemy. 23 soldiers advanced in a skirmish line with an officer directing them, but Romano eliminated the officer first to sever the chain of command before working across the line, killing 16 soldiers despite return fire that exploded branches inches from his head. The Germans escalated their response, bringing up a machine gun team that Romano neutralized before they could suppress his position, but the sustained fire from a single location allowed the Germans to triangulate him, leading to a terrifying mortar barrage at 11:17 a.m., where 4 tubes of 81 mm mortars walked fire toward his tree. Romano pressed himself against the trunk as shrapnel whined through the air and trees disintegrated around him, surviving only because American counter-battery radar picked up the German positions and silenced them with artillery just before the final salvo could strike his tree, a stroke of pure luck that allowed him to continue his vigil. By December 20th, the final day, Romano had been in position for 64 hours, battling hypothermia that slowed his mind and body, yet he remained the master of the logging road, which stayed empty until the Germans made a final desperate attempt at 7:34 a.m., with 41 soldiers supported by 2 half-tracks. Romano engaged them before they reached optimal range, killing drivers and gunners to stall the vehicles, and then turning his rifle on the infantry, pinning them down and killing 18 more, until the survivors retreated, leaving the road littered with corpses and burning vehicles, a testament to the psychological terror of a position that killed anything that approached it. At 2:47 p.m., American reinforcements arrived, finding that the German offensive in the sector had stalled partly due to the one sniper who had made a single road too costly to use. When Romano finally climbed down from the tree at 3:15 p.m., his legs collapsed and O'Brien caught him, whispering, "You did it, you crazy bastard," though Romano said nothing, just staring at his hands that still gripped the rifle. The debriefing on December 21st was a tense confrontation between the rigid structures of military hierarchy and the undeniable reality of results, as Romano sat before Battalion Intelligence Officer Captain James Buchanan and Major Harold Steinberg, admitting to maintaining a static position for 3 days in direct violation of orders, arguing that the tactical situation required adaptation to save American lives. While Buchanan focused on the violation of orders and the potential for a court-martial for unauthorized tactical modifications, Major Steinberg recognized the exceptional combat effectiveness of 87 confirmed kills and the disruption of a critical supply route that added 6 hours to the German timeline. The decision was made to issue an official reprimand for the violation of orders while simultaneously forwarding the case to the division sniper training cadre for analysis, a contradictory conclusion that punished the insubordination while seeking to weaponize the innovation. Steinberg told Romano that war was about killing the enemy and preserving forces, and while his methods made him a cowboy in the eyes of command, they also made him useful. Romano left with a reprimand in his file, but word of his stand spread unofficially through the 99th Infantry Division, inspiring other snipers to attempt similar extended positions, leading the army to revise its sniper doctrine in March 1945 to allow for static positions in defensive operations under specific conditions, a change that validated Romano's instincts without ever naming him. Reassigned as a sniper instructor, Romano spent the final months of the war teaching 43 other snipers the art of patience, tree positions, and the cold logic of calculating risk, telling them that while static positions were suicide in offense, they were sometimes the best option in defense. After the war ended, and he returned to Brooklyn in September 1945, Romano buried his story, refusing to speak of the war to his wife Teresa or his 3 children, working as an aircraft mechanic at LaGuardia Airport, where the methodical maintenance of engines replaced the tension of the trigger. He lived a quiet life, calling Patrick O'Brien every December 20th to talk about everything except the war, until a reunion in 1973, where a Vietnam-era sniper instructor named Lieutenant Michael Greco approached him, revealing that Romano's method had saved his life in the jungle, proving that the core concept of the static defense was timeless. Romano retired in 1982 and spent his remaining years working on cars and teaching his grandchildren to shoot 22 rifles, refusing interviews from historians and insisting that he had simply done his job, that there was nothing exceptional about killing 87 men in 72 hours, maintaining that it was just the grim necessity of war. He died of a heart attack in 1997, and at his funeral, attended by a frail O'Brien and a few others from the 99th, the truth finally came out to his children, when O'Brien explained that their father wasn't just a soldier, but an innovator who had risked everything, his life and his freedom to do what was right. The logging road in Belgium is now a paved highway, and the oak tree still stands, an anonymous witness to history in a forest that has forgotten the violence of 1944. There is no monument to Vincent Romano, and his name was redacted from the initial reports that changed military doctrine, leaving him as a ghostly figure in the annals of warfare, an unidentified American sniper whose legacy is found not in statues but in the field manuals that guide modern soldiers. His story is a reminder that innovation in war often comes not from generals in headquarters, but from the soldiers in the freezing mud who see a problem and solve it, accepting the consequences of disobedience to achieve the mission. Romano's 87 kills were not an act of heroism in his eyes, but an act of professionalism, a fulfillment of the unspoken contract that places the mission first and survival last, proving that in the terrifying calculus of combat, the deadliest weapon is often the one that possesses the discipline to remain perfectly, terrifyingly still.